think for our discussion, I'd like to begin by starting on agriculture. I think throughout the conversations and the presentations we've heard, we've noted how important agriculture is within the Namibian economy. And this is specifically true given the fact that such a large proportion of our workforce is actually employed in the agricultural sector. However, its contribution to GDP is relatively limited. And if we look at the data and the statistics that Dr. Emma presented earlier, we'll note that 70% of our population is directly or indirectly involved in the agricultural sector. However, on average, it only contributes about 8.7% towards GDP. So, with that said, I think I'd like to start with you, Dr. Puertas, and ask specifically, I think it was quite interesting to note that in your paper, 2/3 of the extremely poor are actually engaged in the agricultural sector. So could you discuss, maybe give us some context in terms of the challenges that are faced by rural farmers, especially within the sub-Saharan African context, and share some examples of successful interventions or programs that have been implemented in order to improve their livelihoods and essentially break the cycle of poverty?
Thanks a lot. That's a lot in one question, so I hope I won't take too much time cutting if I go too long. First of all, that figure hides a high heterogeneity of employment situations in the agriculture sector. We've heard a lot about the dire situation of subsistence farmers, but we shouldn't forget also those engaged in wage employment in agriculture as well, where there might be low wage and insecure forms of work as well. Challenges associated with income generation come because of the structural features of the sector. It's seasonal, and seasonality is determined by the crop that is being cultivated, high exposure and dependence on natural resource availability. We heard issues related to land, but also water scarcity, increasingly concerning water scarcity in many places. Natural disasters, they are highly exposed to that. And so I think that this low and erratic income generation makes it so that it's very difficult for many people engaged, especially smallholders, so subsistence and maybe those that are trying to access the market, to make the right investment so that to make their activities more productive. And I think that may resonate in Namibia and in other African realities as well. That comes together with, we heard informality, they might not have access or they might not have the possibility to register their activities when it comes to an agro-related business, remaining in agriculture. And that exposes to challenges thereby having barriers to access finance or to access other kinds of business services that would come together, even subsidies. And during the COVID pandemic, many support that the governments were providing were maybe conditional on the fact that we were registered, and that was creating barriers to men in the sector. And I could continue with many issues that I already presented earlier on, associated with occupational hazards that are increasingly worrisome in the context of climate change, or persistent child labor and forced labor in the sector. So it's a long list of challenges. Now, things that can be done. Recently we had at the ILO a very important meeting, a tripartite meeting with representatives from governments, employers and workers organizations, and they discussed policy guidelines to promote decent work precisely on the agri-food sector. I would invite people to look at that document because it builds on lessons learned and good examples at a country level, because it was experts, with the support of the ILO, and experts adopted these guidelines and provide orientation as to what can be done in that sector. It's a long document, it's very comprehensive, so I'm not going to cover much of that, but just to give you an example, for example, on access to finance. So access to finance it's a clear challenge for many. It's not only in the production side, but also in many of the activities that our colleague just mentioned in her presentation on the local food systems as well. And what would be the solutions when enabling the environment, for example, to access to finance, investing in rural infrastructure that can facilitate finance providers reach rural areas, connectivity as well comes hand in hand with that, but also awareness campaigns about the importance of being included in the financial system among rural communities, and what are the channels that they can benefit from, and some financial literacy, especially among vulnerable groups. Then we would see that there is a need to support the providers and maybe to acknowledge that there can be other kinds of providers reaching out to rural areas. We can think of financial cooperatives as one of the examples. Then there are needs to tailor certain products to certain groups, to give them preferential access, where we see that there are systemic barriers associated to their situation. Youth and women come to my mind, but there might be other categories. And then last but not least, there is an element of risk management in the agricultural sector that shouldn't be forgotten. It's not only about credit or savings, but also about agricultural insurance, just to give a concrete example, because that could enable to set a virtuous cycle of investments that I was mentioning before. So you could break and enhance the resilience of the farmers, and I think also using inclusive approaches to digitalization could expand access to agricultural insurance as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for highlighting the challenges that lie ahead or that we face, and also the policy option that exists, and we'll spend some more time speaking to policy. I think next we'll move to Ms. Ntsabane. Ms. Ntsabane, welcome to the panel. It's good to have you with us. I think as many of us are aware, Botswana has been making quite substantial gains in terms of sustainable agriculture. Could you share some initiatives or strategies that have been implemented to promote sustainable agricultural practices and also increase agricultural productivity in rural areas?
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you, and good afternoon as well. Maybe to start, let me start with the history of our policy and how we got to where we are. Taking you back to as far back as 1973 when we started our rural development policy, which is the first policy that we had in Botswana. The thrust of that policy, most of it was looking at livestock development, water supplies, extension, and credit and subsidy programs, and marketing through the cooperative. All of this, when we looked at it, was about improving the agricultural sector. That was the only sector that was proving to be viable at the time, that was sustaining most of Botswana's population, which at the time was mostly rural. And it was only later on in 1975 where we moved on to have what we call the tribal grazing and land policy, TGLP for short. And this one was really focused on improving the grazing land for livestock management. As we know, we are a cattle industry, so most of the initiatives were there to ensure that, how do we ensure that our livestock, we avoid overstocking and everything. So the problem then was that it is only in 1991 that we developed a policy of agriculture, which is still in place and we are really trying to review it now. At the time, issues were really about self-sufficiency in that policy. The shift to food security comes a bit later in Botswana. The whole idea was that let us feed Botswana, let us try, but later on we would realize that maybe it's not just about feeding Botswana, but also about making it possible to ensure that there's food and such, the need to move to that. Transitioning to that, in 2002, we had a review of the policy that I talked about in 1973. And this policy, although it does not really mention of agriculture in there. There are two strategic things that are there that are very much related to agricultural production. That are very much related to agricultural production. One, the issue around poverty and livelihoods. Who is mostly affected? It's the rural farmers. What about their livelihoods? Where do they get the food from? They get it from agriculture. So the focus has been on agriculture and provision of water. We are a drought-prone country, water is a scarce resource. How do we make most people basically rely on rain-fed? So within the Ministry of Agriculture, we've had quite a number of initiatives. The first one, the other one being the 2007, the Livestock Management Infrastructure Development Program. In that program, there are 7 packages, 3 of which were focusing on resource-poor households, being small stock, guinea fowls, and Tswana chicken. So it's a package for resource-poor people who would be assessed and then they come in to apply for those. And then the other ones, the 4 are on infrastructure development, water production, borehole drilling, and reticulation and animal husbandry. Following that, in 2008, there was the Integrated Support Program for Arable Agriculture Development. In short, we call it ISPAT. And this one basically focused on rain-fed agriculture. And really assistance is on the inputs and drought power and cluster fencing. How have we made it sustainable? I think the sustainability issue has really been not so easy. I think we've had many things, innovations to try and boost this sector. We have more people who would go into it, particularly with rain-fed agriculture. They would go in, despite the fact that they've been given the seeds and everything, and abandon the fields because they can tell there's nothing that is going to come out. But we keep trying to be innovative. One of the things that government has done is to link agriculture to a school feeding program, to ensure that at least there's a market that is ready, that is going to support these farmers. For example, in the school feeding program, one of the things that have been introduced is eggs at primary schools. So all schools in rural areas, at least twice a week, these children have to be fed with eggs. Chicken has also been introduced in the school meals, particularly in secondary schools. Sorghum and beans, all of these have been introduced to try and create a market because this is where the bulk of the budget is going. So those are some of the interventions that have been put in place to try and do that. But also, interesting nowadays, we've moved on to horticulture, which is also coming up to be something very new. And the horticulture market is also coming up, where farmers are encouraged to now produce, and then they're making associations where they can sell their produce easier. I think recently you've heard or we've seen in the papers that we've closed the borders and we are not having quite a number of vegetables in Botswana. And this has really, really helped. We have more people who are into vegetable production, particularly those who have land. Those who don't have land have been able to access land with their relatives, their parents, or anything where they are able to produce. So some of those, these are some of the initiatives that are there. And through the public works, we've also been able to construct roads, particularly from the fields, because access roads from the farm to the market has always been a problem. So if you don't have any way of transporting the produce from the farm to the market, it becomes a problem. So through the public works, there are certain initiatives that are geared towards accessing roads. And the rural electrification program also has been extended to the farms as well. So we see a lot of farmers that are also going to utilize solar power and those that are using the main fuel electrification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's quite interesting to know that the policies are really trying to tackle a number of different challenges, ranging from creating markets and also addressing the infrastructure challenges and gaps that exist. So now I'd like to move the conversation a little bit closer to home. And Mr. Endjala, I have a question prepared for you that speaks particularly to policies and the effectiveness of policy. But before we get there, I'm quite tempted to kind of go off script and pose the same question or similar question that I asked Ms. Ntsabane. So from your perspective at the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development, how can we ensure that our agricultural sector is productive in Namibia?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, thank you very much for the questions, and good afternoon to all the participants, all the protocols. Sorry. So yes, good questions. How can we improve, let's say, productivity when it comes to agricultural sectors? If I can just borrow from the opening remarks that were delivered this morning here. You see, we seem to know, we agree on most things, and we know where the issues are. For example, we are saying we need to increase the income of the rural people. We need to diversify their livelihoods, to engage in a number of things, and also have to create jobs. But also at the same time, we are saying the agricultural sector is one that is very important, but when it comes to the money terms, its contribution to GDP, etc., is very low. And also when it comes to the job creation parts, you see many people have been employed in agricultural sectors. But even despite the economic growth being good for the past years, the job part has only been deteriorating. So coming to the question, the how can we improve that? I think we have to look into few things. So if you really have to improve the productivity of agriculture, we need to ask our question. Where can we make money? First of all, in agriculture, because we want to increase the income of the people, especially people. Where can we make money? So I think it's time to rethink of moving to the higher product or higher value production crop, for example. A number of our farmers, for example, especially in our areas, especially in the communal areas, and we know they are concentrating on growing mahalo, for example. But if you look at the yields they get paid, the yield they get per hectare on mahalo, I think the last statistic was 200 kg per hectare. It's extremely low. So it's time to engage to see what can we bring in. So currently the government, especially the Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform, they are leading what we call the smart climate agriculture approaches, conservation agriculture and handling. So those are the small things that we can concentrate on to improve the productivity of the sector. The other element we have to look into is also the input that is needed for the farmers to grow. And input just across the board, being in the livestock, being in crops, etc. The input is always extremely high. People cannot afford it. So I think we have to rethink, maybe from the government, how can that be, a subsidy can be provided to lessen that. So but we have to agree also on the approach to agriculture. We cannot be doing everything everywhere, throwing little money here and there to livestock, to crops, etc. I think we have to agree on the approach. And what we discussed here this morning, we talk about the value chain development. Let us concentrate on a few products that we can deliver to the market. Starting with the market, working back downwards. If it's a beef, let's concentrate on supporting the beef farmers and sort them out for every step of the way that they need, from range, from input that they need, feeding, etc. Let's help them so that they can make money. If it's a horticulture, let's pick crops. Tomatoes. How can we help our farmers to grow tomatoes to deliver to the market? Help them with the subsidy, for example, especially if they are struggling with the seeds. I mean, what Dr. Ila presented here, one of the recommendations look into the seed support system. So this is exactly what is challenging our farmers. What we have seen farmers engaging, they lack all these inputs, and we expect them to contribute to it. It's just impossible for them. So, and the last presentation we had, also the issues of close to the value chain, also the food systems approach. So let us all look at to say, how can we produce food that we can eat locally, but not only concentrate on one element of food production, everything along with the food production, producing, processing it, consumption, all these steps, that work them out. And all along they've been trying to say the farmers don't have a market to sell. I think that is not absolutely correct. It's all up to us to make that market. As the last speaker said, the biggest customer we can have in a country is the government. And we know the Ministry of Finance, they pronounce themselves to say, let us give preference to local procurement. So it's all up to us to how we work the system out. So if we can produce food locally and sell this food even to government institutions, I mean, we have in the school feeding program, we have them locally. Where are we currently procuring food for school feeding program? So I think we need to concentrate on those few things. Management development, food systems approach, and providing support every step of those chains so that we can deliver for us help of ours.
So you're saying we need to identify our areas of specialization, provide the necessary inputs, and then create the markets for them.
Absolutely. Market first, and then we move on.
So still same argument, and like I said, I want us to have a conversation around policy. And I think it's been discussed. So could you provide an assessment from your vantage point of the overall effectiveness of these policies in actually driving broad economic growth, and specifically in terms of driving job creation and growing the economy? And then further to that, if I can just add an additional question there, is how involved have local communities actually been in terms of formulating the policies and then also implementing them?
Okay, so good question. Though I see myself also as a player, now maybe a referee to say how effective is the policy that we're implementing. But so our approach to, unlike the Botswana experience, to rural development, we do not have a single policy for rural development. So at the beginning of independence, now we have more than 20 policies that are directly dealing with the rural development. And these are cut across all the government ministries. So the policy for rural development, which was the latest, not the latest for the government, but the latest of other sector policies, is more talking about the coordination, addressing coordination, because government has realized to say, if we are not coordinating, if we are not integrating our planning, we are missing the point. And we cannot spread all over the places without ensuring that we coordinate all these interventions. So that's why the essence of the policy for rural development is mainly the coordination part, bringing all stakeholders together. Of course, there is if you can ask me, one of the challenges with that approach is to say, because now the level of coordination was put under the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development, because the same level for other ministries, it's not very difficult to call to task those players that are not, let's say, delivering their promises. So this is the most difficult part about the coordination that we have faced. But I would say overall, I mean, a lot of strides have been made in achieving the government objective because of rural development. A lot has been achieved, particularly if I can mention some few sectors, even for the water, for example. Our people in the rural areas, they are not waste compared to other people in the other parts of the world. I mean, 90% of people in the rural areas have access to potable water. Of course, there are a few pockets here and there, but that's a government achievement so far. So yes, number of policies, as I said, cross-cutting, but I would say so far it's not so bad. Also, if you look what the government spends on the strategies for rural development, if you look at the current, I think the medium-term expenditure of the government spends roughly 30% of the total budget of the government is spent on rural development interventions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Endjala. So you're advising us that it's also an issue of accountability, essentially. And I like that you brought up the fact of, or the subject of coordination, and I will ask Mr. Ajambo to speak to that later, but that's a very important point. So I think now we are going to turn to Ms. Rim, who is joining us online. Ms. Rim, are you still with us? Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. So, Ms. Rim, I'd like to ask you a question around local participation. And I know that in your presentation you spoke to it a little bit, but could you provide some examples of successful initiatives in which local involvement and leadership have played a pivotal role in shaping rural development strategies, and also expand a little bit on how local capacity can be strengthened to facilitate bottom-up development?
Okay, so the example that comes to mind, I'm Korean, is actually the Sima window that was mentioned by a colleague earlier. In that approach was a process of dignifying farmers. So that village movement is sometimes criticized because it was at a time when Korea was coming out of deep poverty and we had a very strong leadership. But nevertheless, farmers were given really empowered in their own decision making. But the structure was built. So there was roads created, and everyone in rural areas had new houses, stronger houses, from thatch roofs to tile roofs, etc. And then farmers were really given a voice. And I think they also put a lot of emphasis on village-to-village competition, and so they organized themselves to sort of win these agriculture fairs and things like this. So it was a way to really bring back a pride in this work. And also because the president, I think, came to give these prizes directly and all these things. So it really, whereas before they were considered as sort of seasonal workers, and then most of the year they would be spending money on drinking, whatever, and now they were really brought back into part of the local development and participating in the infrastructure development on the off season, and then during the season they participating in competitive fairs and things like this. So I would say, this is really how they build also cohesion within the agriculture sector, and to this day the cooperative is quite successful. But the Namibia remains very strong, has financial services, has also supermarkets, has continues to really represent the farmers.
Thank you, Ms. Rim. So essentially, empowering local communities through, for example, co-ops is essentially a long-term strategy in which we can ensure that we're not only building rural communities, but that it will stay like that for the medium to long term as well, as per the example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the rural populations are often say they need to be represented and things like this, but they are often a bit shy or the lack of education, etc. So you really need to create that environment where they feel safe and really empowered, not just as a sort of one representative comes and speaks on behalf of the farmers.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ms. Rim. So we are going to be opening the floor for questions soon. So please begin to prepare your questions. But before we do, I have a question for Ms. Ajambo, which speaks particularly to collaboration and also how effective the UN system has been in terms of supporting the government. So, Ms. Ajambo, how is the UN system collaborating with other stakeholders, particularly the government and also other non-profit organizations, to drive rural economic transformation in Namibia?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My sister Figu, good to see you. It's an excellent question because it also gives us work to do. Within the UN system right now, at the country level, there's something we call a UN development system reform. Previously, we were working in the silos that Dr. Ajambo spoke about. So each UN agency approached whoever the stakeholder was, whether it was government, private sector, CSOs. So WFP would talk to the government, FAO, individually, ILO. But again, what we have learned also as a tool for governance is coordination. Coordination is difficult, but it's a tool for governance in the sense that it enables you to include a lot of people or stakeholders that you could have left behind. So the approach we are taking on the system at the moment is that the UN meets our stakeholders as one. Right? I'm the resident coordinator, who is my principal, Madam Popolan. We believe that through a coordinated approach, we are able to mobilize the best of the UN's assets, right? And issues such as rural transformation, it's multifaceted, as we've seen in the room, right? Is economic, social, and environmental aspects to it. So we cannot bring only UNECA or UNESA at the table for these conversations. Clearly, we have to bring in UNEP, we have to bring FAO, we have to bring WFP. So we want to basically pool relevant human resources, bring them to the table to sort of meet the demand-driven requests of our stakeholders. And that's the other point, which is the UN has access to global resources, whether technical. Well, financially, we can talk to our friends at the IMF or the World Bank or the African Development Bank. But technically, and from the convening aspect, we have access to those resources. So, but they have to be demand-driven. So, to your question of how has the UN supported rural transformation, it makes me ask, has the government asked for UN support on rural transformation? And I think today's meeting, Symposium, is evidence of the fact that the government is making requests to the UN on rural transformation. So the response is we pool our resources, we listen to the request, and hopefully we can support and walk along with government and the various stakeholders. And of course, you mentioned civil society. In most rural areas, as the colleague from OECD mentioned, civil societies and community-based organizations have a strong role to play to enhance and amplify those voices of those shy people, right? So we value that multi-stakeholder collaboration, and we want to empower civil society. I see my very good friend from Tupuna's here. So we tend to provide sort of that space for every relevant voice to show up. And on this topic, it will not be governmental. You will need the private sector, you will need the community-based, you will need churches, if you hadn't even thought about it. So again, when we coordinate, we enhance governance, we pool resources, we bring the best. It's not easy. So leadership.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ajambo. So basically, you're telling us all we need to do is just ask. We just need to ask you. And I think this event in the symposium is testament to the fact that this is really a burning issue within the Namibian economy. So we trust that the UN system will be providing us with support. So I think with that, I'll pause the prepared questions. And like I said, open the floor in case there are any questions. We do have roving.
Thank you very much. And requesting to stand First of all, let me appreciate them for organizing this program, because I think that all of us in this room, we have become Kachikeka. Now that the deputy governor was saying what is Kachikeka. Yeah. When you are going to close, explain this, meaning that you want to go back to the villages. You have to explain that Kachikeka. Why you also, let me also thank the first Canadian, the moderator, especially when you introduced my colleague, the sister from Ireland, when she had done a PhD in European economy, masters in European economy, pity us African and Norwegian. We are able to produce our own studies in our own economy, understand what we want. So pity on us, but it's a challenge. So I'm very thankful for that. Also, I want to start where my sister from then ended. And of course, not saying elders, spiritual people, they have reached out to them. They are busy developing also the system of FAWA, and what we call Eastern Rural Employment Framework, that covers 5 areas. One is employment in enterprise development, access to social protection, guarantee rights, and promotion of social dialogue, and cross-cutting issues. Under cross-cutting issues, like discussing issues of gender, youth, child labor, and those kind of things. I hope that the UN will also assist us in terms of coming up with this, so that we can present to my Honorable Minister of Labor who's here. I need to thank you, because in all meetings you see that in the last, irrespective of the busy schedule, shows that how serious you are on your task. The issue also going to my Mama Natalia here, welcome back to the education sector. You were Miss Land, and luckily President Bob realized that you belong here. The Tibet, I think that we need to start changing the curriculum of Tibet to start responding to the needs of local people, rather than having a centralized curriculum from Tibet. At the end of the day, it does not blow back, but it rather encourages the migration, people to move to cities and sort of thing, where we start looking at and start criticizing that there's no services in cities just because we are lacking to plow back there. The other one, which also touched by the speaker online.
Sorry, sir. I'm very sorry to interrupt you.
Unfortunately,
we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, no, very last one.
Yeah, please.
It's on the issues of the begging. I think that we are crafting our policies on what we have currently. When I listen to the Honorable Minister and the government, they are talking about begging to go to rural areas. I don't think that should be approached. We need to move to interrogate the concept of communal or solidarity economy. Can those people not start their own banks? Can they not coordinate that? Because we have seen that how exploitative is the banking system. Now, if you are saying that they should expand their exploitativeness to the rural community, we might go to make sure that the banking, those communities are also affected. Lastly, is the issues of food security. How many in the house here don't want Namibian to have food security? How many of us want Namibia to have food security? How many of us in this room want Namibia to have food security? All of you, except me. We don't want food security, we want food sovereignty. And that should become a debate. So if you have a policy that talks about food security, that policy is doomed to fail. So we need to start setting our vocabulary so that we can work towards those vocabulary. My apology, my sister.
Thank you. My name is Endjala. I'm a private economist consultant here. And my comment, if you like, is addressed to the distinguished representative of UNDP. You mentioned the example of China, which could be emulated. And indeed, we know that on the 25th of February 2021, the President of China declared officially, publicly, the end of extreme poverty in China. Now, if I may transport into Namibia what the President of China said about China, I have not been there, but I assume that there are no young men there anymore. Scam building, garbage building. There are no more people, including sometimes family, living on Zodompi side, like one of Kufriben, past Judah. There are no more kids, babies, I mean China. There are no more homeless people. So, China achieved. And we know that over the past 40 years, they pulled out of poverty around 8 million people, as representative for UNDP said. So now the question, can Namibia imitate China in achieving? Now, I'm going to be there, as I said, but analytically, we know that the successes of China are due to many factors. I will just mention three. One, they have a big territory. It's a continental country. Big territory, the possibilities of having all kinds of resources you need for economic growth and development, poverty alleviation, to go to. Two, they have a big population. Big population, it means all kinds of skills, all kinds of talents, a big taxation basis, a big basis for industrialization, which means economic, which means possibility of job creation and the poverty alleviation. Now, how can we practically, we in Namibia, how can we have a domestic market of 1.4 billion population? Even if we ask our young Namibian ladies to produce a baby every month, I don't think we'll achieve it before 200 years.
Thank you very much, sir. I think the question is clear. Can Namibia achieve poverty eradication in the way that China did as well? Sorry, sir, I think in the interest of time, we'll just move to the last question, if that's okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Titus, and I'm a security researcher and advisor. I feel like security was a little bit left out in this initiative, but my first question is that we are good at presentations and policy making. Just wanted to find out in terms of time, when are we going to implement the transformation of the rural economy in Namibia? Or are we going to wait next year October, when we're going to do another annual symposium? And the other thing as well, in terms of security, where does security fall in here? Because I haven't heard any speaker talking about security, because we are talking about transformation, and transformation comes hand in hand with security. Thank you.
Which is to ignite the thinking. And China is presented as an example, right? So if you're serious about making a change, you ask exactly the questions that he asked. And then the counter, whatever response you get to the questions, then helps you determine and define the relevance of the experience to the Namibian context. So it is not to say that it should be copy and paste, but it's a case study approach, whereby if they did it this way, what is the counterfactual, and what does that mean for our situation? It's inspirational. 800 million people is a lot, and I think if Namibia does work on rural transformation and not look at the China example, it will be amiss.
The other one is actually Egypt, talking about South-South cooperation. And this is for benchmarking purposes. You look up to people who have done it, and then you learn from it. And then you pick what works and what doesn't. So that's the point. It's not too. And then the other one, security, is we have what we call sort of a nexus approach to development in the UN, is the peace, humanitarian, and development nexus. So it means that we are linking peace and security and development to a stage achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there is data also on security in Namibia. I can share that as well. And we also increasingly, again, given the three persistent challenges, we do think that indeed peace and security might be something for the country to think about going forward when the grievances justify grievances. So it's a good observation. We ascribe to the notion, and we do have a nexus approach to development that includes peace and security.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ajambo. I think, Mr. Endjala, I'd like to turn now to you. The second question was about how we have policies and presentations. When do we get to the point of implementation?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So, as we speak now, some of the initiatives that we've been recently here or planning, they already under implementation for the government. So, we're supposed to start like yesterday already. But I can assure you that there's a lot of intervention that currently being implemented in the various programs of the various ministries. So there's no definite time to start. So it's an ongoing process. So we are implementing, and I can assure you that even the issues of peace and security, they also quite relevant, and they're also taken care of in the relevant policies, especially in the main context. As I said at the beginning, if you read the current policy for world development, the strategy for world development, is more talking about more collaboration, it's more talking about joint implementation. There is no specific focus to say it is a water or it's health, because as a country we have already a policy on water and sanitation. We also targeted the world development. We have a policy on education, a policy on health, a policy on agriculture. Those are all rural issues that we are talking about. Even peace and security is also talking about.
And I think the security question is really quite relevant given the fact that we have so many young people in rural areas, and if we don't create opportunities for them, it could potentially become a security concern. So with that, we've come to the end of our panel discussion. Thank you so much to all of our panelists who joined us today. Thank you all to the audience for your attention. And I think with that, I'd like to call up our Director of Ceremonies to just introduce ourselves.
I was looking at the Namibian economy as it was presented here, and I was thinking the thing that came out very clearly is coordination. We have so many policies, but coordination, and I'm happy that the UN is also emphasizing that coordination is important in order to eliminate a lot of wastages and so on. Secondly, when the presenters were talking, I was thinking of our green schemes. We have green schemes around the country, and I was thinking agriculture as a farmer, and most Namibians, even my friend here from the trade union is a farmer. That's why he was talking to the governor. And I think the problem here, Namibia is one of the driest countries in Africa. And farming is not a joke. It is very difficult. Now, for most farmers here, the most difficult thing is the input cost. We have to source material for our inputs, and it is very expensive. Just look at you want to raise some chickens or goats. You need to feed these animals. And the problem is the feeding. So if we can concentrate on our grain slaves, do the necessary, for example, produce lucerne and all these things that are needed by Academia or Mututa. We need this feed. The government must subsidize this and getting in the agricultural sector will increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to allow, in the interest of this dialogue and this conversation, 2 more burning interventions. I have my good friend who has been speaking about housing at every symposium that we have hosted. Give some answers for us. Go ahead, sir. You keep it in that.
Yes, my name is Ajambo. I'm a building designer for 7 buildings in my name. And I'm talking from mountaintop experience. I'm waiting for Bank of Namibia for financial model 2 for the poorest of the poor, where people can live in housing for 50 cents a day per square meter. I want to share my ideas with the youth, that the youth must take over, that we can get millionaires in the ghetto, that the youth can flew back into ghetto again. I want to tell Mr. Eunice to keep the ghetto from making design it into a Disneyland. You have seen nothing yet. We've got so much things on our board. I'm sitting with 8 students. I'm the head of technical. I'm a designer. I'm sitting with 7 papers in my name. I can make the price high as possible. I can drop it down as to 0. I'm taking care of the poorest of the poor. What can we do the wallet of the poorest of the poor? What can we do for the grocery list for the poorest of the poor? I want to look back into that. What can the government do? What can the government do? If I can get my license from the governor of Bank of Namibia, yes, it's possible.
Excellent.
And that is all. The rest is history.
Excellent. Thank you so much. One more intervention.
Sitting me on the spot, but thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, Namibia. I had several questions earlier on, but I without them because other speakers got an opportunity. Mine was basically directed to the panelists who spoke earlier, and it relates to some of the concerns that were raised by Mr. Kavi from the trade unions. Basically talking about the issues around automation in the agriculture sector. If we need to look at what that would mean in the rural economy. When we automate in the rural economy, we also need to think beyond when we are transitioning from the subsistence farming to commercial farming. We will be required to apply automation and mechanism, making sure that the transition happens. How do we protect, and also tying in with what Mama Yatwe was talking about, how do we protect the young people who are particularly involved in providing or who are currently involved in the rural economy? How do we protect those jobs, that they are not absorbed by the automation in that industry? Could we also look at other alternatives in terms of financing and facilitating the financing in the rural economy? Could we consider alternatives such as the digital platforms, looking at e-commerce? How can we use those available technologies, moving with the times, to ensure that we don't just repeat exactly what we are currently doing? There are a lot of challenges, especially with the commercial banks, and there's a lot of complaints and discontent. How do we empower our young people who are currently involved in the rural economy to expand without having to sacrifice the jobs that they are currently involved in or creating more jobs in that rural sector. It's really important that we consider all of those. The other concern I heard had to do with what the representative from the UN raised, who spoke about the lack of data. There is a key informant as we plan, even as we talk about transformation, how do we collect the data so that we plan effectively and ensure that the interventions are truly directed to what is on the ground. It's important that we collect the data. I think, thank you very much. Yeah, also,
that's the problem.
That's the final
one. Politician and mind.
Final one, in terms of technologies that talk about climate resilient crops that we have been talking about. I think as we are moving ahead with that, we really need to consider, and I would like to echo the proposal that was given on the reskilling of our participants currently in the rural economy. They need to align to the technologies that we would like to employ so that we really don't lose the current critical mass that produces what we are currently consuming. Thank you very much.